Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Mikka Burrell. Mikka, how's your week been?
It's been all right, Phil. Happy May. Can you believe May is upon us?
No. No.
Time is flying by. Oh yeah, the week's been okay. How about for you?
It's been good. For the most part. Just I mean, obviously the weekend sports no longer bring me joy. At least soccer doesn't. So yeah. My teams are in the mud fully at this moment. So just trying to live, you know.
Yeah, and the pain keeps coming because we've got another L to talk about tonight, unfortunately. So
yeah, we'll be chatting about El Paso Locomotive's loss to FC Tulsa last weekend, 1-0, and really a lot of the conversation will center around why we think it continues to go wrong, just, you know, what we're seeing, and ultimately, like, what would need to change in Colorado Springs to make sure that this season gets, I would say, back on track, but just on track to begin with. So all that being said, if you are finding us for the first time, we are Seriously Loco, so check us out on any podcast platform of your choosing, and subscribe, follow whatever the platform allows, and then follow us on Twitter and Instagram as well. We've got all kinds of locomotive stuff. And yeah, we also do watch-alongs of away games on Twitch and YouTube. Those are a lot of fun. As much as they've been painful this season, it is sort of the one respite in that it is time spent with other locomotive fans, and it can be a lot of fun. So follow us on those platforms as well and join in. But Mikka, I mean, there's really no beating around the bush here. Like, 1-0 loss to FC Tulsa, who had been struggling as well. And there's basically no hiding from the fact for Locomotive that not only is this a loss at home to a team that they should be aspiring to beat, I would say, even in a down year, like, this is a result that you would hope that they can grab a hold of. And it's made even a little bit worse by the fact that it just felt like it was never really on. Like, the win was never really in Locomotive's grasp. It really only ever felt like the game was going to go one way.
yeah, and that's really unfortunate given that we did highlight some positives on the road from Tampa Bay, and got a decent point on the road despite being outplayed, to be fair. But there were still things that we could have built on, and we just simply didn't. And couple that with the fact that a pretty poor FC Tulsa team was able to come to our ground and maybe not dictate the play, because I don't know that that's necessarily, I wouldn't go that far, but
Sure.
I mean, they were able to generate a lot more in the attacking third than we were. And yeah, it just quite simply isn't good enough.
Yeah, just another, I mean, we talk about how rough of a result it is, and when you talk about sort of the by the numbers from a statistical perspective, because while it was playing out, it didn't feel good to watch, right, as a Locomotive fan, and we'll get into sort of each phase of play and why we think the system is continuing to just not maybe emphasize the strengths of the players in the squad. But the by the numbers look to confirm the eye test. Locomotive are outshot by FC Tulsa 15-8 Of those, they are also outshot in terms of shots on target, 4-3. I think Locomotive's 3 shots on target, 2 come late in the second half, when they've sort of like thrown the kitchen sink at Tulsa. Only 1 of those comes in the first half. Tulsa have 10 shots inside of the penalty area to Locomotive's 5. So double there. And despite Locomotive having control of the game, like you said, I think like Tulsa didn't necessarily dictate play. Locomotive did have more possession, more passes, more accurate passes, and Tulsa were more accurate or played more accurate long balls, more accurate crosses, and had more touches in our penalty area than we managed in theirs, which for as much possession as we had, obviously you would hope that you would be able to get at the defense a bit more. And the tough thing, though, is that, like, in terms of individual players, Locomotive do win more duels, even if just barely, than FC Tulsa. So the players are still competing. There is still effort. There is still that energy. And it just feels like for all of the effort that there is, it's not really leading to a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, the chance creation is, I mean, for as many talented attackers as we have, the chance creation is just nowhere near where it needs to be. Some of the new signings that we've made that are, seasoned attackers in the USL Championship are simply not getting touches in the box where you'd expect. Just a lot of our shots that are on target are not really working the keeper. I think the one that you mentioned in the first half is an Eric Calvillo hit that, Creek is able to just kind of bounce off his gloves and catch and bless Eric for trying, right? But we're just not getting quality looks, and the volume is just not good enough either. So yeah, the way Brian put it, perhaps rather glibly is the game is about scoring more than the opponent, and we're just simply not doing the things that we need to do in either box, really. Because I mean that stat that you just mentioned about how many shots they had inside our area compared to how many we had to theirs, I mean double. That's shocking, especially at home. And it can't continue, can it? I mean, it's, we're officially the worst team in the league, with Colorado Springs, to be fair, battering Oakland Roots on the road, and Noah Delgado losing his job. Some say that was a decision made prior to the result, but I'm sure that only hastened things. So it's starting to feel like Colorado Springs is a proverbial must win, as they say.
Yeah. Well, and it's starting to feel too, I mean, it must be awkward, like just calling a spade, like it must be awkward when a team that you just lost to has their manager sacked, like for a loss to a team that on paper should have been, or, we're thinking is maybe the weaker side. Although we'll talk about Colorado Springs later and how they might be a tougher proposition than originally thought. But yeah, like you said, it has to improve. And, we've talked from quite early on this season about the fact that we thought the system was not like highlighting the strengths of the players within it. And I think this game for me felt like across each phase of play, like it really did feel like it illustrated just how it's not setting up the players for success necessarily. Starting with, I want to start at defense because it's perhaps the like easiest one to point to, in that I think like early on everyone was like, LOL, high wing backs. People are playing, spamming it in behind. I think it's getting worse in the sense that Tulsa's goal is essentially like, when you watch this goal back, if you were able to remove all of the colors and any indication of what team was which, and you showed this goal to Brian Clairhout and his staff, they would tell you that this is the sort of goal that they want to score. Because if we look back at this goal, the keeper starts with the ball and plays the ball out to a defender, Bradley Bourgeois. He plays the ball over the top to, I think it's Ferry or one of them. Anyways, it's knocked down by a Tulsa attacker. And then
it's knocked down and drags Noah Dollemeyer out of the backline with him.
Yeah.
And he loses that duel.
Yep.
Yeah. Just wanted to
clarify. No, it's a good point, because Blaine Ferry is actually the one who I think ends up with the ball, plays a pass out wide to a fullback, Patrick Segrist, who is running into acres of space that had been occupied by Javier Navarez. So he's forward there. The Segrist is in tons of space. He makes his way like into that space, plays across. Admittedly, it's deflected.
Off Navarez, I think.
Off Navarez, who's recovering. And it goes into the box. Diallo, scuffed finish, but good, makes enough contact to kind of guide it past Jamali Waite, and that was enough. And when we talk about the defending, you talk about a center back getting dragged out of position. You talk about wing backs being sort of like having to run back towards their own goal. A opposing wingback is in behind our wingbacks, like early in that phase of possession. And I think when we've talked to Brian this year, it feels like part of what he has pointed out is that he wants like the center backs more involved in attack. And I'm just not seeing like how the balance comes to this setup when you're expecting 3 or 4, I guess 4 of your 5 defenders to be involved going forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, credit to FC Tulsa, because it is a very decisive team move. I mean, it's really good counterattacking play. And everyone does their part in the goal. Everyone who touches the ball, good first touches, quick passes, the ball out of the back is immediately switched out to the wing. And like you said, Segrist is able to bear down. And at that point, the momentum is taking our team back. We're running back to our own goal, something that we've seen ad nauseum this season. Us, reacting to a switch of play when we're caught out. So, I mean, good for Tulsa that they were able to capitalize. I think you're absolutely right. It probably is a goal that this system of locomotives is meant to score and create on a more frequent basis, but it just doesn't. And, I don't necessarily think that this system in and of itself is inherently wrong or anything like that.
Sure.
I think that the players that we have for it don't work.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, for me, I think that this is the most top-heavy Locomotive's ever been. I think we have so many like good attackers and midfield probably could use another body or two. And defense, it's basically an all new defense. I mean, we're, and with a defensive midfielder anchoring it, and then, two new players to the side.
Yeah.
And, I think I think Locomotive has had better defensive units in the past. So yeah, this to me is the most top heavy Locomotive we've ever seen. So to expect this iteration of Locomotive to then use so much of that defense in the build up when they're not particularly defensively strong is just a recipe for disaster, I think. And I think it has been thus far. I mean, I think we have, I don't know, I think it's fair to say we have enough of a sample size to say that the system is not necessarily making the best use of players that we have. Because, I mean, at the outset of the season, it wasn't just us saying that the transfer window is very successful. I mean, look at USL Championships own coverage. John Morrissey at USL Tactics was very high on the recruitment. We were high on the recruitment. These are good players. A lot of them are very experienced in USL Championship, got the pedigree playing in this league, and they're just playing less than the sum of their parts.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the system just doesn't fit the players that we have. And I mean, Brian's not dumb, right? He I asked him, after the game, I asked him, what do you think is going wrong? And what kind of is your idea? Because I asked him specifically about kind of this mysterious, like, number 8 role that no player has been able to really make their own. And, he did say, maybe I need to look at that and see if I'm putting players in the best positions to be successful. Do we need 3 up top? Do we need to change something? He kind of asked those rhetorical questions. So it's clearly something that the coaching staff are looking at. I just worry that maybe we're reacting and not being proactive, right? And, we've gotten into this hole before where, your first half of your season is just so poor that it's hard to make it up. And we saw that with John Hutchinson, right? So, yeah. And, I don't think that the more that I think about it and the more that I look at Brian's body of work, as it were, with Locomotive, I just have come to the conclusion that the players don't fit the system, because we've had success with Brian before. He's literally guided this team to the longest unbeaten streak in its history. Like, he can do the job, right?
Yeah.
He has gotten it right before. But we were playing almost exclusively 4-4-2.
Yeah.
So, and actually it was towards the end of the last season where we started seeing this 3 at the back that things were very suspect, and we barely squeaked into the playoffs. So, make of that what you will. And sorry to get all rambly there, but yeah.
I mean, it's completely fair, and it is essentially like at the tail end of the winning streak, and really when after Bensay left, we basically started playing a back 3, like from then, which is just really interesting.
And that was a very destabilizing departure.
Deeply, yeah. Probably one of the, like, he won't go down this way because he didn't play enough games for us, but he was probably one of the best players to ever play for us, because he was such a calming presence. And yeah, once he departed, we basically started playing with a back 3. And I mean, we talked about it before we started recording, but it was, you talk about the Tampa Bay draw last season, which was June 17th of last year. So, 11 months ago. That was more or less, that was the last game of the unbeaten run and the first game of the winless run. And during that winless run is when we started playing this back three. Bensei left, and we haven't gone back. And it is really kind of surprising, given just how successful Brian was with that 4-4-2, that we haven't. I don't know. I think other managers would have already reverted, right? Like, hey, this is what worked, and we're just going to do that, and hopefully it works again. So it is really surprising that he's kind of like stuck to his guns with this like 5-3-2 system. I don't want to belabor the point on the number 8 because we talked about, I think we talked about it last week. We talked about he did answer a question about it in the press conference as well. But it does sort of bring me to the other aspect of this midfield, which is Liam and Eric, because they are the constant, right? Like next to this attacking number 8, which I think we all agree. And there are plenty of listeners out there who have let us know that they also do not like this, false 10 attack, most attacking of the midfield trio, as Brian referred to it as a false 10. That role in and of itself is difficult. It feels like that role, though, not making the impact that it should, is having a really tangible impact on how Eric and Liam play too, because Eric isn't playing as like a traditional 8. He is getting forward sometimes, but he's not having the impact that he did in season 1 with us, right? Like that first year, he was essentially like the best player, or one of the best players, most consistently good players on the team. Liam is playing traditionally as a 6, probably has been the best of the trio consistently, but all in all, it just feels like along with the midfield, along with the defense, the midfield as well, like it feels imbalanced. It feels like it's not really accomplishing what we want, and each player individually is not really showing us everything they can do as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have liked about Eric Calvillo's game historically is, one, his shooting, right? His shooting is quite possibly some of the best technique in the team, if not the best.
Yeah, one of the purest strikers of the ball, maybe in the league, ?
Yeah, right. So his shooting, and then 2, the late runs. But when you have someone whose job that ostensibly is, you probably feel like you're playing within yourself a little bit.
Sure.
And I do think Eric Calvillo feels like probably he needs to be more positionally disciplined, because any one of Tumi Moshabani, Arun Bosojevic, or Joaquin Rivas is supposed to do that. Meanwhile, lately it's been Joaquin Rivas. He's just not like good enough on the ball in midfield.
Right. You want him like not touching it out of his feet.
You want him in the penalty area. Yeah.
In front of him.
You want him in the penalty area. Yeah. You want him wide. You don't want him trying to like dribble like past a defensive midfielder or something like that, or try to receive it on the turn. Like that's, yeah, just seeing Joaquin take so many touches like in the center circle is just depressing, to be honest. Like that's, and I don't want to speak for the player, but it's just like looking at him, like it doesn't look like he's having fun.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That could just be me. I could just be reading into it. But yeah, I mean, no doubt it has effects on the whole midfield composition, because I just think people are doing things that aren't natural to them. And naturally that's going to have ripple effects. So
yeah, I think, the midfield conversation, or that like the balance conversation, I'd love to be able to see this data that the club has, because I know they've got it. But I'd love to be able to see like really accurate heat maps or like touch maps for the midfield three, because I can't say for certain because I haven't seen the data, but I would be willing to bet quite a lot of money that map does not show you the picture that you'd want when you say we have a number 6, a number 8, and like a 10 ostensibly in this midfield. Because if you have a 10 traditionally, you can sort of draw like a box from the 6-yard box, like the width of the 6-yard box, extended out about 50 yards, right? And that's sort of the box that you want your 10 taking touches in, right? Like central areas of the pitch within the area where you could, either spray passes out wide or dribble into an area where you could either have a shot, find a pass, find a through ball, like something like that. You definitely don't want guys taking touches like inside the center circle, like almost exclusively, or in and around. You don't want them like toiling, right? Like you want them getting the ball in good areas where they can make something happen offensively. And I think like when you look at how deep Rivas is having to come to get involved in the play, and then how hassled he is as a result, because he's coming into traditional like number 8 areas where he's having to like be combative and be like involved in the scrap, that's where I think like, and this is, again, is like not really a discussion of the player, because Joaquin is just not that guy. Like the guy we had who could do that was Dylan Maris, right? He could play in a midfield 3 and still be the 10. And it takes a very specific type of player to be able to do that.
Right.
And that's just like, Dylan, you could say he was a wide attacker in the very like broadest sense, but he's not like a winger or a striker, right? Like he could play as a false 9, maybe. He could play like off the striker. He could play on the wing, quote unquote, but he's not a winger. He's not a forward. He was always an attacking midfielder, always operated between the lines, and just had a lot of experience doing that. When you take a traditional forward and stick them in that area, like they are going to get bogged down sometimes. Like, I don't know. It's a little bit of the like, you stick the sports car in the mud and like, yeah, it's got a crazy engine. It's all souped up and it's not suited for like what you're trying to do. So yeah, I just think that continues to be the biggest question. And we did get, Mikka, in the press conference, I think it is worth mentioning that looking ahead to what is definitely a must win against Colorado Springs, and not to steal the thunder from that conversation, but you did get an interesting answer, I guess, from Brian in this respect.
Oh my God, I forget what did I ask?
Oh, just about the number 8, like about that role. And he sort of hinted at like the fact that maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I asked him, we've seen Arun, we've seen Toomey, we've seen Joaquin all in this role, no one's really made it their own. What are you asking them to do, right? And that's when he used the term that you referred to, like a false 10, someone to kind of link things and play ahead of the rest of the midfielders. But then he did say, like, but maybe we need to look at it. And he said the words he used were, "I take responsibility," right? Mm-hmm. So, and I'm not trying to frame that as him saying like everyone's right and I'm wrong. That's not what he said. He's just saying that there could be another solution, right? And that he has to look at that, and that's exactly right, because that's his job, is to find solutions. Yeah, and it's funny too, because like when you look at, because what I found really interesting too, and I asked Eric Calvillo about this, is that we played the exact same 11 that we played in Tampa. Mm-hmm. And I asked, is there basically would like reinforcements help the situation? Because it almost feels like the team is starting to just pick itself.
Yeah.
Right. And we do have some injuries, and that kind of thing. And of course, Eric, being the professional he is, he gave the very diplomatic answer of like, it's just next man up, and you got to take your opportunities. But I do almost wonder if there is something that is almost making Brian feel like he's forced into the selection. Because if you look at our bench, I mean, it's young players, right? It's Emiliano Rodriguez, who, congratulations to him, makes his debut. Diego Abarca, who's really just not in the thinking, but still being selected for the bench.
Yeah.
Miles Lyons, who, did not start the season well and has been dropped ever since. Yuma, who is kind of like a locker room presence at this point, right? Yeah. Not to be disrespectful, but so, I almost wonder if he feels like, well, I have to keep playing this for the time being because I don't trust the options to rotate or to change it, right? So, and when you're still waiting on Petr Petrovic to get fit and for Brandon Craig to come back, like I do, maybe I am mitigating a little bit for Brian in that, like, maybe he just feels like he doesn't have a choice, because logically, why would you stick with something that hasn't worked 8 times now?
Right.
9 times, actually. Open Cup. So
yeah, we can't forget. Well, the last bit of the team, and like you said, it's a little odd that we're going to talk about it in the way that we are, because on paper we have so many attackers, but we're going to talk about it as, I mean, the attack is essentially game to game. We talk about the wingbacks involvement and all of that, but this game highlighted for me just how disconnected the attack is from the rest of the team. Like, we talk about build up, and I would say that like our build up does happen at times, and actually does build up. But very often the attack is delivered the ball, not to feet, not like by passing, but by like these long balls that they're expected to either like chase down or collect or fight off defenders for. And we've got basically like two, between Justin Dillon and Amando Moreno, who, if they are available, are the two who are being started up top. I think between the two of them, it's striking me as we have one player in Justin Dillon who understands exactly what he's meant to do in this team. He's meant to be a target for these long passes. He's meant to back people down. He's meant to bring other people into the play. And he has done that with some success, like this year. He has but he works a ton, and he gets like precious little in terms of actual like chances in front of goal, opportunities for people running in behind. And it's primarily for me like due to how distant he often feels from the rest of the play. Like, if Moreno's not very close to him, who is he meant to be bringing into the game, right? Like, if a ball gets launched up to him, the midfield's not particularly close. It's really just him and Armando up there. So if he's got no one to bring into play, then it just becomes a two-man game of him and Moreno trying to beat whoever is back there. And on the flip side, before we go on, Moreno, to me, at least, and this is purely from watching, and again, this is not digging out these individual players. This is talking about system. Like, I think that Armando Moreno understands what he's good at, for sure, but I don't think he understands exactly what he's meant to be doing, like, at any given moment out there, because often he feels like sort of either like too far away, or he makes a run that like nobody sees, or he's not really, I don't know, like it just doesn't feel like there's a cohesion there. And yet Armando Moreno is our top scorer and the only player on the team who has more than one goal. So like it just like, for me, the whole thing, it just is kind of nonsensical because we're not creating a lot. We continue to try the same thing. It hasn't been working. And we have one player who seemingly exactly understands what he's meant to do in the system, but it takes a ton of hard work and it maybe takes away from the other things he's good at. Then we have another player who is really, really good, like elite within the league at certain things, and we just don't get to see it that often, but he's still so good that he keeps scoring.
It's almost like Armando Moreno's role is like too free.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like bizarre to say, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but yeah. It's just a shame because like that's such a potentially potent partnership, right? Yeah. With Justin Dillon and Armando Moreno. Like it's giving Giroud Griezmann. Like it could be that.
Sure.
But it's like it's just not been, at least not to any like replicable degree game to game.
Sure.
And yeah,
is the issue just we don't have the Marco Verrattis and the Camavingas and the Tchouaménis of the world?
No, I mean, I just like to see us shake it up. Like I think again, like a secondary point to what I was talking about before of like maybe Brian feels like he can't break up this group. I also wonder if he is hesitant to like drop certain people.
Yeah.
Because that's uncomfortable, you know? And
yeah.
If rumors are to be believed, the locker room is pretty fraught right now as it is. So to then double down on that and say, well, I'm going to switch it up and you're not playing.
Right.
When you know, player X, you're not playing. I'm going to bring this person on instead. Like,
sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I do have sympathy for that because it's like in the hardest times is when you have to make the hardest calls, but maybe there's a hesitancy there to do that. So.
And you mentioned the locker room being fraught. Like, obviously, rumors are rumors. We've heard some stuff. The bottom line is, like, to me, that's not even controversial to say. They have no wins in 8 games. If it wasn't fraught, I'd be even more concerned, right? Like,
well, and Eric Calvillo was very candid about that in his post-match comments, saying, you know, it's depressing. Like it's literally those were the words he used, depression. And perhaps more concerning in those comments was kind of like the And I don't know that if he meant it this way or if we're taking it away that was not intended, but there is almost like a sense of like people are like in their little cliques or on islands by themselves. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a lot of like joined up thinking or unity right now.
Sure.
And it's not because we have like bad characters in the locker room. That's not what I'm saying. I just think people are dealing with this adversity in very different ways.
Yeah. I think you can see, and maybe I mentioned this before, but I think it bears repeating. Like, I think you can see in the aftermaths of these games, particularly a couple of like really tough losses, obviously on the road in New Mexico against Oakland, turning 2-1s into 3-2 losses, and then this one at Tulsa, or at home against Tulsa, I should say. There are those moments at full time where like guys are clearly really devastated with what's going on, and like they are all on their own. Like at full time, each player sort of like does their own thing. Like a couple guys like drop down and are like really disappointed. A couple of guys like are sitting for a while. A couple of guys, it's like, I don't know. I know that like a lot is made in like soccer media of like body language and like trying to read into this stuff. And it's like a data point across, a human's whole career of like, they're going to training every day and they're watching film and they're doing all this stuff. Like they're putting all this work in that we don't see. And it's like, okay, well, I'm taking this one moment and I'm choosing to make this the reality. Right. But like, I think there is something to a team that's together and a team that's like going through something, but like fighting through something in those tough moments is going to lift each other up. Right? Like maybe not physically, but at least like verbally, emotionally, whatever. And it just feels like we don't necessarily have that. There's a lot of frustration, understandably. There's a lot of like heads that are down. Like I think as soon as Tulsa scores, it was like, here we go again. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just not seeing. I know that they're putting the work in, and I know that every player is a professional and they're absolutely like giving 100%. That is like not, I would never accuse a professional of whatever. I don't think they're downing tools. I don't think they're like trying to get somebody fired. I don't think anything of that is like that is going on. And that like saying you're fighting and then being a group and fighting together are like two very different things, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think we are seeing individuals fight like in moments. Like they are trying to win all their duels. They're trying to win every ball. They're trying to like individuals are doing that. And I don't think it's necessarily leading to anything for like the collective.
I keep thinking of like what, like, I wonder what the corporate leader, like LinkedIn types would say is the answer here. Like, in Italian, in calcio, for example, they have the retiro, right? Where when a team is playing really poorly, they basically go on a forced work retreat.
Yeah.
To just get away from it all and focus, right?
Sure.
And the most like interesting one that I can think of recently was when Napoli did it during Carlo Ancelotti's reign, and that ultimately ended poorly. But I mean, I'm just thinking of like, what would like the corporate America answer be to this? Like, what do they need to do? And it got me thinking too, because over the weekend I saw on Instagram that a lot of the team had went out to NEEP Collective, which is like this new food truck park
Yeah.
on the other side of town. And I kind of was like, that's nice. Like, I like
Sure.
that they are spending time together away from the pitch and with their families. And I just wonder, like, does that help? Right.
Yeah.
Because on the pitch, it seems like things are not clicking, and you just wonder sometimes if off the pitch that's the case too. But I don't know. I don't know if they need a retreat, if they need to go up to like Ruidoso or something and regroup. I don't know what the answer is. Brian and company will have to figure that one out. But it's as a fan, like, we're frustrated, but it's also sad. Like, it's sad to see because we know what this team's capable of and what they've done in the past. And so to be where we are right now after what I think was a pretty successful offseason and what Brian, I think, rightfully deserved in some goodwill in bringing us back to the playoffs and not letting that one season out become two. Yeah. It seems like that has completely it's fallen away, and it's also concerning because there's like an apathy that I feel has set in, not from the team, but from fans. Whereas there used to be like outrage. And I almost think apathy's worse. Yeah.
It's, and I think that's where, we talked at certain points during John Hutchinson's season, we talked about sort of the disconnect, that was being felt. And at that point, it was more of a frustration, I would say, from the fans that they felt this disconnection between the community and the team. Now, like, what's going on now is far worse. Because people aren't irritated that the team is disconnected. They are actively disconnecting.
Right.
And that is, it's a position that the club simply can't afford, to allow to go on. When you see, clubs at this level are viable, when they have a lot of stability, when they have a really great fan base. And this club has that. I was even looking back at points last season. Reported attendance is one thing, as we may say, for this season. The Derby, right after the Tampa Bay game, so the team's 12 games unbeaten. The Derby at home, which we lost to New Mexico United, 8,400 people were at that game. That is over capacity for seats in the swap. That is a standing room only crowd. And that was the last time that more than 7,000 people paid to come to a Locomotive game.
Yeah.
And that was July 1st of last year.
Mm-hmm. And from our perspective as people who cover the team, and I don't want to shame anyone else who creates content, but I'm just going to state a fact. I was the only one in the post-match press conference that was not employed by El Paso Locomotive FC.
Yeah.
So when people are not coming to even talk to you, and again, for whatever reason, I'm sure everyone has good reasons why they weren't there, but it's just very alarming.
Yeah.
And I spoke to you afterwards saying I almost feel like a moral obligation to keep going because this team needs to know that people care, right?
Yeah.
And but anyway, it's just it's sad. It is.
It's a bad moment, and I think we've really only had right now and 2022 were the only seasons where people genuinely ccalled for the manager's job, in a genuine way. I mean, there were a handful of hashtag Lowry out moments at different points, which was always very comical to me. But but it sort of now begs the question with all of that piling up, where we've got like this feeling that there is a feeling of apathy, not just amongst fans, but also amongst like news outlets. Like, I mean, when you say nobody, like literally there wasn't anybody else. So like, and I know Bravo's had a game, so maybe that had a impact. But when you talk about that general apathy, you talk about how poor and just like how poor the system functioned on Saturday. This game against Colorado Springs, especially on the back of Noah Delgado sacking for Oakland Roots, like just how much, like, is this a must win for Brian Clairhout? Like, do you think Mountain Star and like the upper echelons of the front office of Locomotive would make a change if it's 0 wins from 9?
To be honest, I don't. I don't think that they would make a change.
Sure.
Just simply because I think that change would cost them money. Yeah, the less said about that, the better, probably. However, I do think it is a must-win.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think we're in must-win territory because this Colorado Springs side, prior to their win against Oakland, were right down there with us, right?
Sure.
Actually below us in the Western Conference table. And yeah, you mentioned at the top of the show that they might be a tougher proposition than we thought, and I tell you, they took Oakland Roots apart on the road.
Yeah.
Damos, the former Clairhout charge, was really putting himself about. Doesn't score, doesn't assist, but my goodness, was he just an absolute menace to that Oakland back line. I think it was Malik Foster who created both the goals.
Yeah.
There was just some really nice, like, one-touch passing in the wide areas from Colorado Springs that gives me heartburn knowing how much space we leave in those areas, that they probably don't even have to one-touch it. They could just send it down the line and be in. So I think this matchup tactically is also going to be potentially fraught for us. And yeah, I mean, we really have to respond in a big way. And I think we've seen before that's for better or for worse, for whatever this means. Sometimes we have risen to the level on the road.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I do think it is a must win, but I'm just not convinced that there's a consequence for not winning it necessarily. And I want to make clear, like, we don't call for people's jobs on Seriously Loco. Like,
No.
that is totally not our remit at all. But yeah, I do think that we have to win this game or, you know, I think the belief just is absolutely in hell if we don't, if it's not already.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned, it's funny because it should in theory cut both ways in that, one of the things that the very good teams in USL did this last week is against 4-2-3-1s. We saw both Louisville against Hartford and Tampa Bay against New Mexico effectively use a 3-4-3 to give the central midfielders in that double pivot too much to do. Like they gave them too much space to cover, and it really tore apart. I mean, Louisville hit Hartford for 6, absolutely destroyed them. Tampa Bay should have scored 4 or 5 against New Mexico. I think Arteaga like contrives not to score one from like underneath the bar, basically. But all that being said, it should cut both ways. And if Locomotive were to be able to find a way to get Aiden Roca and Speedy Williams like more spread out in that Colorado Springs central midfield, they might be able to do something. And actually, you know, when you've got like Malik Foster, who's not going to be doing as much tracking back, like you could end up in like a 2-on-1 on the wings against a fullback and get some overloads in those areas. And I just don't think we tactically are like prepared for that, if that makes sense. Like, I think we've trained clearly like this system. And I don't know that there's, you know, that like, hey, we changed the shape and magically it all looks better, right? Like, these things take training, understanding like where other players are in different game states, in with and without the ball, like all that sort of stuff. It just takes time to like gain that level of understanding. And if they've only trained this shape or this like approach, I think it'll just take a lot of time to unwind it, and to try something else if we've decided it hasn't worked, which I think we both are saying that it's not. Interesting wrinkle here about Colorado Springs. Yosuke Hanya, who plays left wing for Switchbacks, on loan from Colorado Rapids, former FC Tokyo product, and played for them in J3, I think. But he looks a really tidy player, and he actually misses a bit of a sitter against Roots that probably would have made it even worse in Noah Delgado's last game. But yeah, I just think there are a lot of players kind of coming into their own for Switchbacks from a confidence perspective, and unfortunately Locomotive's kind of headed the other way.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even mention Juan Tejada and how good he was. I mean, again, just like tearing down that wing and being a real menace.
And he comes off the bench too. So like, right. He's not even, he just has half an hour to run at people.
Exactly. And with that, he's also very like astute defensively. Like, he doesn't shirk those defensive responsibilities. So he's definitely the type of player that you feel comfortable bringing on late, because you know you're not going to give up anything, even though he might bomb forward. But yeah, I mean, Colorado, for them to be trending upward as we are just not trending anywhere, is not great. And so, yeah, I mean, I see this absolutely as a must win. And we've got plenty of priors with Colorado. Haven't always had it all our own way, but have had some decent performances against them. So we're going to have to really, really dig deep, and hope that we can get something.
Yeah. I don't think I'll ask for a prediction on this one, just given the fact that like we may end up predicting.
Well, the funny thing is, I said that we would score against Tulsa. Tell me why they keep their first clean sheet of the season against us. Yeah. Like, come on.
No, I know. It's crazy. It's just rough. I don't really know. Trying to think of the right way to wrap this up. I guess the bottom line, if there is a change, or like if Locomotive are going to win this game, what will be true about their performance?
I think that we cannot switch off even once. because another thing that you and I spoke about last time is that our mistakes are getting punished so ruthlessly.
Yeah.
That like we just can't make any, to be honest. Where other teams might get bounces or get away with stuff, we're not getting away with anything. So I think if we're going to get something out of this game, we're going to have to be tidy for 90 plus minutes. We can't give anything away. We really can't.
Yeah.
So, and I know that might sound trite, but yeah, I think we basically have to be flawless as a team. And when I say get anything, I'm not even talking about a win. I'm talking about a point. Like,
yeah,
I think to get all three, like we're on top of being pretty much defensively flawless. I think we're also going to have to see like probably someone with some individual quality to do something for us, which is another thing that Eric Calvillo touched on is, he commented that we can't rely on individuals, which leads me to think that like they kind of recognize that they have been in a lot of the goals that we've scored.
Yeah.
So, there have to be some more team moves leading to goals.
Yeah. And to deepen the wounds, we see Sac Republic score like a really great team move, maybe one of the best team moves I've seen this season with Nick Ross involved. So yeah. It
is what it is.
It just keeps getting more painful. No, I agree that we won't be able to switch off, and I would say the other aspect, like if Locomotive are to win the game, we're gonna have to be brave, and play the ball through the lines. Like we're not going to be able to just like hit it out to the wings and just like say, hey, Navarra, Stauffer, like go do something. We're going to have to like get it down, play stuff like through switchbacks, get people close to each other involved in the game, like stop just hitting it forward and just be like proactive and try to like really assert themselves like on the game, because I think up to this point we've just been like passive in a lot of these games where we don't ever bully teams, right? Like we never really force them to play the game that we want them to play. I think we just got to be, it may be oversimplified. Well, it definitely is, but we've got to be brave and we've got to be willing to play some football, like down on the ground and, not rely on the individual quality, but rely on the collective quality that this group has, like, and trust the fact that like we have a bunch of great passers and a bunch of great dribblers and a bunch of players who are super intelligent on the ball, have great vision, and like we don't really, like let's just try to play a game that emphasizes that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, all that being said, obviously this is not, this is not the brightest episode, but it is what it is. Like we're 8 games into the season, Locomotive are still winless, and we're hopeful that they can turn it around. Nobody wants to see or have to see like sweeping changes in order to start getting wins. This team is capable, based on the names on the team sheet, of turning this around. So for all of the tough watches that have been out there this year, this team is still 100% capable of being something special. They just have to start. They have to start showing it, rather than us just knowing it based on the names. So, hopefully they start that with this weekend, and we'll be back after Colorado Springs to chat just how it went. We'll also will likely be live, I guess, from for a watch party. We'll watch this one live on Twitch and YouTube, and hopefully we'll have something to celebrate. But yeah, aside from that, we'll be back. We'll talk about what went down in Colorado Springs, and then we'll be here regardless. That's the thing. Like, we'll be here rain or shine. You guys can count on that. Until next time, hope everyone stays well and stay loco.